Hello and welcome to Say What video tutorials for English Intermediate. Today we're going to look at present tense part 2. In part 1 we looked at the present simple and the present continuous. For part 2 we'll be looking at a different aspect, the perfect, looking at the present perfect simple and the present perfect continuous. We will start by looking at the form, firstly of the present perfect simple. Now, in this form, we have to add the auxiliary has or have. Now, have or has depends on the personal pronoun. Have, first person and second person pronoun, and has for third person singular pronouns. We would also apply the past participle. So, an example using the verb finish, I might say I have finished or I finished in the contracted form. Or in the third person, using he or she, we would say he has finished, she has finished, or he's finished, she's finished in the contracted form. In the negative, we see the same rules applying by adding the negative not. Again, has or have with not, and the past participle. So it would become he hasn't finished using he, or I haven't finished using I. In the interrogative, again we would use has or have, then the personal pronoun, and then past participle. A question example would be, have you finished? In the present perfect simple, we are using the past participle, and in some verbs being irregular, the past form and the past participle are quite different. An example of this is the verb drink. Now, drink in the past form would be drank, however, the past participle would be drunk. Again, we have the verb go. In the past participle, it would be gone. Let's compare it now with the form of the present perfect continuous. Now here we have the same use of the auxiliary has and have, but we are adding a past participle been. Now this is the past participle of to be. Then we would add the verb in the ing form. An example of this using the verb work, for example, I have been working. In the third person, we might say, he has been working. Similarly again, with the negative, we would be including the word not. Now this would go before the past participle been and after the auxiliary has or have. An example, he hasn't been working, or I haven't been working. Again, in interrogative, the same form would apply, has or have, the auxiliary, plus the past participle been, then the verb in the ing form. An example of this might be, have you been working? Let's have a look now at the use. Now we can compare the two when we talk about the use. Both the present perfect simple and the present perfect continuous talk about something which started in the past but have relevance up to the present. So they either have a result in the present or they're still happening now. Having a result in the present, we might have a look at an example such as, I've lost my job. Now, I'm still unemployed, despite having lost my job happening in the past. If it's still happening now, an example of this might be, we've been saving up to go on holiday. Now here, I'm still saving, and the holiday hasn't happened yet, so it's still happening now. So again, they talk about something which started in the past, but they are relevant now to the present. There are some verbs which can be used in either the present perfect simple or the present perfect continuous with very little difference in meaning. Now, these verbs are normally ones that describe activities which happen over a period of time. Some examples of these would be live, work, study, learn. Let's look at an example using the verb live. I have lived in London for 5 years. And I have been living in London for 5 years. In the first example, we have the present perfect simple, I have lived in London. And in the second, we have the present perfect continuous, I have been living. Now, both are giving the same information, so here we have very little difference in meaning, if any difference at all. Both of them are giving the same bits of information. Let's have a closer look at the use then. We use the present perfect simple when we're focusing on the result of an activity or event which is now complete. An example of this is, I've read that book you gave me. Now with the present perfect continuous, we're not focusing so much on the result, but more on the activity or the event itself. Now this could be whether it is complete or not. An example using a very similar situation is I've been reading that book you gave me. Again, the focus is on actually reading, not having finished the book. I've been reading that book you gave me. We also use the present perfect simple to say how often or how much has been done. An example, I have read 3 books. Here the emphasis is on how much has been done. I've read 3 books. We use the present perfect continuous to talk about how long something has been happening. An example, I've been reading for 3 hours. We use the present perfect simple to talk about something that is more permanent and often accompanied by a time expression which will show this. An example, he's worked there all his life. The time expression all his life emphasises that this is a more permanent type of event. Another example, I have always lived there. We wouldn't use the present tense in this case. We would use the present perfect simple, I have always lived there. We use the present perfect continuous when talking about something that is more temporary, often accompanied again by a time expression which would show this. An example, I've been working there for 3 months until I go to university. We have more of a temporary condition here. And again, there is a use of a time expression. We use the present perfect simple when we talk about how many times something has been repeated. An example, I've seen them 2 or 3 times since we met. We use the present perfect continuous, on the other hand, to emphasise the process of change over a period of time that is not finished. An example, your English has been improving since you started coming to class. Now this is something in a period of change, something is improving, so it hasn't finished improving, it's in the process of improving. So there you have it, a brief description and looking at the differences between the present perfect simple and the present perfect continuous. Thank you for listening.